The 2024 presidential race looks tight. Early polls showing we could see a rematch between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. And with the U.S. election less than a year away, some investors fear the race could create more market instability. Here with a look at what this election means for investors is Jermal Chandler, who is the tastylive head of options strategy. Jermal, great to have you on here with us. So what is perhaps the largest or more outsized consideration that investors should be anticipating or at least trying to factor in as we get closer to the election?
Well, you mentioned the election. As an options trader, one of the things we always pay attention to is the volatility index. And we're seeing in the VIX that there's a chance there's going to be a potential volatility around the election. Now, that's not a bad thing. All that just means is movement. As you can see here, what we look from this is every expiration of the VIX futures, and the VIX is the volatility index. And so when you look at October there, the VIX is a 30-day forward-looking measure. So October VIX futures are forecasting that November, which is when the election will be a little bit volatile. And what that means is just we're going to see some movement. So typically, if you're expecting sort of about a 1% move in either direction in the S&P 500, right now, this is forecasting near 2% moves in either direction, which, again, is not crazy. I mean, we saw the same thing in 2020.
And Jermal, for investors who are trying to figure it out maybe on a sector by sector basis, is that something you're exploring rather than just an overall market view when it comes to some of the policy differences between the two presidents, like defense spending and some of their energy initiatives as well?
Oh, Shane, 100%. I mean, we're going to see sector dispersion for sure if there's a change at the White House. That's exactly what we saw in 2020. Sector dispersion essentially means you're going to see, comm services, for example, with concerns like Amazon, maybe because of policy changes, maybe something happens there, right? Or maybe something happens in real estate, which again, real estate really struggled this past month. So you're definitely going to see sector dispersion. And so you want to position yourself accordingly.
And so what is that proper positioning, especially as you have so much oversold positions right now, overbought positions within tech that we've continued to watch and monitor, and even in the course of this in the course of this earnings season here, conflating two of the larger issues here that we're tracking on the day. As you think about this investor environment that's leaned so much into tech, where might that kind of trickled into their option strategy towards a larger event like an election later on this year?
Oh, Brad, now you're getting me to predict a little bit, huh? I mean, it's a very good question because we've seen a lot of movement. You talk about tech. Obviously, Meta's moving crazy today, and it's been a wild week there. I mean, that company's maturing. Look at those guys. They have a dividend now all of a sudden, right? Amazon making big moves today. And so the question is good. Are we going to continue to see this outsized performance in tech? I think personally, yes. I think both, whether the current president and candidate and obviously potential candidates are going to be looking at tech. It's been huge, just particularly over the last 4 years. Pandemic brought all of that forward. And I continue to think we're going to see positive moves in that direction. But again, what do I know? I'm just an options trader. I trade both ways, right? I trade risk. So I think it's one of those things you definitely want to pay attention to, how tech is going to change, what's going to happen with real estate. We've seen commercial real estate really struggle. Is that something that's going to come back? We've seen all these things about office openings, or I should say the lack of space that has been used for office space, particularly in big metro areas. So that's something to watch as well. But you definitely want to, sort of figure out how you're positioned currently in your portfolio and take advantage of possible moves that we're going to see coming in the future.
Jermal, I'm curious how investors in terms of some of the activity that you've seen are moving in response to this, I guess, a delay that we are expecting now from the Fed in terms of any potential rate cut, especially on the heels of this very hot print that we got out this morning. What's some of the activity that you've seen play out in terms of the options market?
So, Shana, in the Fed funds futures this morning, we had a big move there, big change. Everybody's been talking about the March rate cut, right? Basically, Fed Powell, Fed Chair Powell this morning, a couple of days ago, essentially said we're not going to have a March rate cut. And the jobs number basically supported that because of the high wages that we're seeing. Basically shows inflationary numbers inside of that numbers, the jobs data. So as a result, you can pretty much take the March rate cut off the table, which I kind of felt for a while. And I know there's a chorus of a few of us, a small chorus of us, that didn't really think a March cut made sense because it's just so soon after we were really dealing with raging inflation. And so the Fed funds futures / ZQ this morning really changed. March does not look like there's going to be a chance for a cut. May has really changed as well. That's the following meeting for the chance of a rate cut. So that's also really big there. And then if you go further out in the curve, November is something to keep an eye on. The November Fed meeting is about a day after we have the general election. So that's going to be a really volatile one as well. And as far as general options, I mean, look, this week was phenomenal. I mean, expected moves is how options traders really judge every market. And the expected move for this week was about 60 points in the S&P 500. We had a 98-point range this week. So it's been a phenomenal week.
Look, I don't know how those Fed members are going to convene after the election. That's a tough task for themselves, and they've been doing a good job so far, I guess, here trying to tamper inflation. Jermal Chandler, who is the Tasty Live head of options strategy. Jermal, great to see you here this morning.